everybody, and welcome to Paranormal NL Podcast. And we are coming in at you from UPRN, and that's 107.7 FM in New Orleans, USA, and 105.3 FM Gulf Coast, USA. Listen to Paranormal NL Podcast on UPRN on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. EST. I'm your host and founder, Jen Noseworthy. Now, you can follow UPRN at uprntalkradio.com and all their socials. Paranormal NL Podcast believes in promoting paranormal networking and paranormal tourism all over the world. PNL Podcast is sponsored by the BOG team, a boots on the ground paranormal investigation team in Newfoundland, Canada. Contact me, your host Jen, at paranormal.nl.podcast@gmail.com or follow us on Linktree at ParanormalNL Podcast. Now let's get on with the show tonight. I have with me all the way from Texas, USA. Let me bring her on stage. I've got Tui Snider. Tui, welcome, Tui.
Hey there. Hi, Jen. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the show tonight, Tui. So how's the weather down in Texas? Because I'm missing Texas something awful.
I actually don't have the fan on for like the first time in forever. This week was like the first week in months when I didn't have the fan on. So actually I had to think about, where are my socks? I have not worn socks in so long.
Oh, I'm so jealous. I'm over here drowning in rain. We've had rain, drizzle, and fog for the past 2 weeks, and I can hear the ocean from my house. It's really raging pretty loud out there. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and, how you got into being an author and what you do. Tell us more, too.
Well, let's see. I am, like you said, I'm Texas-based, and I'm really lucky. I get to travel a lot, so I'm a Texas-based world traveler, and what I do is I really enjoy visiting historic cemeteries anywhere I happen to be, whether that's Texas or it's Timbuktu, and I take photos and do some research. And I was a travel writer for a while. I was writing for in-flight magazines, and I was writing for more traditional publications about Texas. And they always kind of wanted the usual boring stories, at least to me, because I'm a little more interested in the offbeat and overlooked side to things, as well as the paranormal and, a good cemetery too. So I started writing books in 2014, and it's just kind of taken off from there. Now I write books, and then I give talks about my books. I have even had the opportunity, one of my presentation topics and things I've been researching is actually, for over 10 years now, is about a mysterious airship crash, like UFOs in Texas in 1897. So Jen, 1897. So this predates Roswell by 50 years. And the reason I mention that is because there was a alleged cigar-shaped object crashed about 20 minutes from where I live, in fact. And I was like, someone told me about it, and I thought they were just pulling my leg. And then I started doing all sorts of newspaper archive research in 1897. And it turns out there were hundreds of airship sightings in Texas in 1897. It was actually went across America, but there was a period of time where they were seen in Texas. And so I did all this newspaper research about it. And I ended up speaking at the International UFO Congress about it, which was a blast.
Oh, wow. Exciting.
I took our friend Teal Gray as my +1 for the event.
We have to give a big shout out to Teal Gray. You have to follow her. She's also an author, and she's been on Paranormal NL Podcast now a few times. But yes, big shout out to Teal and her team and the Para Hunters.
She's great. Yeah. So anyway, I kind of got off the rails there. I started talking about stuff I do, but that's probably the weirdest cemetery and the weirdest grave I have ever researched. And I have still not released a book on it, but I have some new, believe it or not, new to me evidence that I feel really rounds out what I've dug up. Actually, to me, what I find super fascinating about the 1897 airships is really not even whether it's true or not, or whether it was a quote unquote alien. that they buried there. But the way they described seeing things in the sky in a time when, today we see planes, helicopters, maybe even a drone goes over. My neighbor gets all these drone deliveries. It's so weird. But, get used to seeing machines.
But, I mean, if you like, UFOs and stuff like that in
Yeah.
Texas, I know that in Edinburgh, Texas, where I used to live over there, they have a UFO festival every year, and Noe Torres is involved with it.
I know.
So
I would love to speak there sometime. I haven't spoken there. I spoke in Jefferson once, but
Oh, I
yeah.
have to get you hooked up with Noe. He'll definitely get you hooked up. Now, you've been on a lot of things. I mean,
Mhm.
your research was featured on numerous outlets like Coast to Coast, AM, ABC, NBC, CBS, and also with, is it TimeOut Travel? Tell me more about some of the stuff and the books that you've written and columns and articles. You got a lot of stuff, and you do a lot of things, and you travel all over the place.
Yep, that's a good way to put it. Yes. I've written at least 12 books. I'm in negotiations for another one right now about cemeteries.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Well, I started off as a travel writer, but I have had a lifelong interest in the paranormal and in overlooked history. Because I think part of it's because I, number one, grew up in a haunted house like so many people
Oh,
did. And
you gotta tell us about that too.
I will. And yeah, and it was frustrating because I was the youngest, so everyone just thought I was trying to get attention, but I'm like, "Oh, good grief, no." And but my frustrations that caused me to go to the library, and I met a really kind librarian. And to this day, I just think librarians are superheroes. They are so wonderful. And she said, honey, you're not going to find what you're looking for here in the children's section, because I was like 10 or 11 at this time. She goes, "You need to go over to the adult section." I'm like, "What?" And she took me over to the section where they had all these books about reincarnation and ghosts and all this, and that just set me on a lifelong path thanks to her.
Okay, she got you hooked.
She sure did. I thought that somehow I was going to find proof to bring home to my family so they believe me. That never happened, but that's okay. I ended up with a lifelong interest. Yeah, so I do. Where was I? Had another thing to say there. I was like, okay, so
You were talking about your haunted house. I wanted to ask you
oh, yeah,
about that
yeah,
when you were
yeah.
growing up. Do you wanna talk a little bit about that? I'm interested
Sure.
in what happened.
Well, all right. So this was kind of funny because yeah, I lived in Virginia till I was like 10, and then we moved to
Okay,
Washington
we used to live
State.
in Virginia too, yeah,
Oh, where?
Washington State, okay, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, so we moved into this house, and it wasn't a particularly old house. I think it had been built in the 50s.
right.
It actually had it during the Cold War, so it had a bomb shelter.
Oh,
But
cool.
my dad used it as his shop. And the funny thing about this bomb shelter was they had put a cat door in it, which I just
A
thought
cat
was
door in the bomb shelter.
I always thought that was hilarious. I
You
know.
know, my friend, a guy I was dating here in Newfoundland used to have a bomb shelter. We used to go down and hang out in it. So, okay, a
I
cat
know.
door in a bomb shelter.
It was hilarious. Oh, anyway. So yeah, but my parents went to the store. It was like a Saturday afternoon or something. I'm
Yeah,
10 or 11 years old, and I'm playing with my hamsters, as I recall. And all of a sudden, I hear the distinct sound of we had a basement, and there was a bedroom kind of below there, guest bedroom. And it sounded like someone jumping up and down on the bed. And it was very distinct. Like, I knew what that sounded like because I knew I wasn't supposed to jump on the bed.
right?
So I would sometimes do it and, oh, they're gone,
Like all kids do,
oh,
right?
of course. And
Okay, so you were home alone when
I
you
was
were
home
sleeping?
alone. It's like
Okay.
3 in the afternoon, but I just was freaked out. So
Could
when
it have been
they
your kitty cat or dog or something doing it?
it happened over and over, but it would happen every few months, and it would
Oh,
only happen when I was alone. So the first time, of course, I tell my parents right away. They check it out, they look all over, nothing, nothing. And the bed wasn't even messed up. That was kind of infuriating. So anyway, this
hmm,
goes on for it would happen, I would talk about it, they wouldn't believe me, and then I would just sort of forget about it. As you do, life goes
right,
on. And
yeah, yeah.
right about the time I'd forgotten about it, it would happen again. Yeah, and I'm talking usually in the middle of the day, a couple times at night, but always if I was the only one home. I felt targeted. And it finally got to the point where I was so mad that this was happening that my anger kind of overruled my terror. Because the first few times, I actually hid in my closet.
Oh, no.
The first time, like in the afternoon,
Tui.
and then I got more and more like, well, whatever. It ends after about 10 or 15 minutes, whatever. It would just, but it was pretty long time. It wasn't just like a couple noises. It was something is very making that noise. Finally, this one time I was like, it was sunny out. It's happening. I was so mad. I grabbed the cat. I put a cover like an Afghan over my shoulders. I don't know why that made me feel safer. I grabbed the it just does. It still does if I'm scared. If I put something over, I don't know why. And then I put grabbed the cat with one arm and I grabbed a pool cue with the other. And yes, and I approached, I went down there and I'm like, who are you? What are you? What are you doing?
Does that mean you were going to throw the cat at it?
I kind of did eventually. So I get to the door, and right when I get to the door, it is still happening. The noise is still happening. And I can see the door's not totally shut. So I just go, hi-ya! And I kick the door, and it flies open, and I throw the cat in there.
No, you threw the cat. Okay.
Yeah, the cat was really like, he didn't like that I had him anymore.
Oh, what a scene.
And then,
okay.
And nothing. It was silent. Nothing. The
Oh.
bed wasn't even. And I walk in, I look all over. I'm like, what? I'm just saying out loud, what are you? Who are you? So this went on for years. I mean, maybe 3 years. And
I have to ask now, the investigator in me, was this an apartment? Was there like somebody over you or
No, it was
on the
a
side
house.
of you? It's a house, right? Standalone.
Standalone.
Okay.
House.
Weird. Okay.
Yeah. So finally, my friend was over. And she and we actually shared a lot of interest in the paranormal. Like we would try and see each other's aura, and we would check esoteric books and talk about them together. And we did the Ouija board together. I have a really good Ouija board story if you want to hear it.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, we have all this stuff going on. We're just actually doing homework this one time, actually being good kids. We were doing our homework, but we were the only ones there. We're like eating cookies and just doing homework. And it happened. And it was so loud, and I was so happy that someone else was there. She was.
You're like, yes, there's somebody there that can hear it too. What did she do though?
Her eyes were huge. I was like, oh, come on, you got to come downstairs with me. She's like, I said, come on. And so we ran downstairs together. She stayed a good 3 feet behind me, and we got there, and I threw the door open, and nothing again. So I was like, but I felt so vindicated that she had been there with me.
Heard it.
This happened. Yeah. And the funny thing is, like years later, when I was in my 20s, I lived on a little island, and I would sometimes hear drum beats around the corner. And she came to visit, and she heard them with me. So I was great. I was like, finally, she's my pal who actually hears things with me. But it was so frustrating. But yeah.
Well, it's always good, when somebody else is there to like, you're like, look, I'm not crazy. Do you hear it? Or
I know, my family. But then the funny thing is, like, after I was an adult, my dad finally confesses that he used to hear weird things in the house, and this weird thing, weird knocking. So when my sister, who was older than me, would be out on a date, he goes about a half hour before she would get home, he would hear like bam, bam, bam. It was always in groups of 3, bam, bam, bam. And he would go downstairs thinking she was locked out, and then he'd hear bam, bam, bam upstairs, and he'd go upstairs. And he would do this a couple times and go back to bed, and then she would show up for sure, and it was, the car would pull up, and he'd realize, I don't know what was doing that. So I don't know, kind of a weirdness. But
what about your Ouija board? What happened with that?
Oh, this is a funny one. I love this story. So, most people have this, well, not most people, but a lot of people have kind of scary experiences with Ouija board. Mine was just strange. It was that same friend I was talking about.
Right.
We had taken a Ouija board along with us on a Girl Scout camping trip. I think we were about 13 at this point. And she and I were really trying to be, scientific about it. Like the other kids were just giggling and just asking stupid questions like, does Tommy like me or whatever? And we were like, no, we have to ask questions that we wouldn't know about. So she and I were Presbyterian, and we had a friend who was very strict Catholic. And she said, oh, I know some Catholic, questions about the Catholicism I can answer and see if you get the right answer, because you won't know them. And I remember one of them was, who is the keeper of the keys, which we didn't know. And it went St. Peter. We're like, whoa. So wow. So we were squealing, and we were getting, information that we thought was right.
Was relevant, yeah. Okay.
So then the Girl Scout leader, of course, by then it was quite late, and we were squealing pretty loudly. And she comes in, and she's like, girls, what are you doing? And you're like, oh, she sees it. She goes, is that a Ouija board? And we're like, yeah. Uh-oh. And she goes, those things, I hope they're a bunch of, hogwash or something. She had one of those terms, this is just nothing. She goes, I don't want to hear another peep out of you, blah, 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 blah. Go to bed. We're like, okay. And so she leaves, and we're like, whoa. And as soon as she leaves, it starts spelling out. We're like, whoa, it's really quickly. And so we wrote it out, and it said, do not, or please ignore Madam of Skeptic. Her real name is Mrs. Smith. And we are like, what on earth does that mean? Well, whatever. We put the board away and didn't think too much about it. And then the next morning at breakfast, this one girl goes, hey, her name was like Hackbarth or something. It was not Smith. And if I were going to make up a name, it would not be Smith. I'd make up something fancy, you know? She goes, yeah, it's funny that the last night the Ouija board said your real name is Mrs. Smith. And she just gets this look for just enough of a second. She goes, I don't want you guys using that again, you know, blah, 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 blah. Don't bring it again. We're like, it was just enough to make us wonder. Well, a couple weeks later, one of us overheard our moms talking on the phone. Long story short, our Girl Scout leader was, even though we knew her as a single, like Miss, you know, we called her Miss.
Right.
She was still legally married. And we overheard, like one of our friend overheard them saying, yeah, it's funny. She has to fly to, you know, this other state to finish the paperwork because until then she's really still legally Mrs. Smith. But once that happened, and we found out that the Ouija board had been correct. So
that's interesting.
It actually knew something that we didn't know. There was no way we could know. That's my Ouija board story.
Wow. Well, tell me some more now about your books. You've got lots of books here.
Oh, I sure do. I have at least 12. Let's see. I wrote, my first book is Unexpected Texas because I wrote about just, you know, the places that are really interesting for road trips, but that don't have the big travel budget that you don't hear about.
Let's hold up some of your books. Let me see. You got some around there?
This is my very first book.
Bring it in, girl. Bring it in.
It's called, if I can get it up there,
Unexpected Texas. Okay.
Yeah, and that's
Tui Snider.
Sometimes people think go ahead.
Yeah, tell us about Unexpected Texas. Well, I love the book cover with the with the hat on top.
Yeah, and that's an actual photo I took in Paris, Texas. They have a little. It kind of looks like an oil derrick, but it's their local Eiffel Tower because they are.
Okay. Yeah.
And it is a guide to offbeat and overlooked places in fun things to do in Dallas, near Dallas and Fort Worth. So places if you live in North Texas, you could go on your days off and have some fun. Paris, Texas is in there. I have chapters about a lot of different towns. Here in Texas, we have a lot of what I call courthouse towns. They're towns where they had a courthouse in the 1800s, and there's still a historic downtown area, usually with some haunted buildings there, and they're really fun to visit. So, but there's some funny things in here, like there's in Grand Saline, they have their visitor center is made out of bricks of salt.
Salt. Oh, okay.
There's a salt mine there.
Okay. But now, does that help keep the spirits away, being that they don't usually like salt?
I have no idea. It'd be fun to do a paranormal investigation there. I don't know, but I did. My second book actually was a book. This is this is a author's proof, so it doesn't have that. If you buy it, it won't have that ugly gray band on it.
Right, but bring it all the way forward. Yeah, that's Paranormal Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about Paranormal Texas.
Sure. It's a travel guide to haunted places in Dallas and Fort Worth. And so, let's say you've got some ghost hunting equipment and you're like, well, where can I go and investigate? You could look in this book, and I did historic research for all the different places in here. And then I went on paranormal investigations at many of them. I visited at least every single place in here.
Right. And you're hunters too, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So do you have a favorite place in that book where you like to go and visit, or that you like to go and investigate? Do you have a favorite?
I would have to say Mineral Wells is one of my favorite places.
That comes up quite often. A lot of people like Mineral Wells. Tell me why you like Mineral Wells, Texas.
Because I just feel like it packs the most paranormal bang for your buck. I mean,
okay.
I also love Granbury. We can get to Granbury too, but I really love Mineral Wells. It has the Crazy Water Hotel there. Now that's been all fixed up now.
Mm-hmm.
But in the 1920s, Mineral Wells it's a small town now, but it used to be a real jumping joint. Like everyone from the Three Stooges to Frank Sinatra to Will Rogers to Ronald Reagan to, all these movie stars that you can think of would go there. And then anybody who was sick, you would read, they would go there and stay there to take the waters and see if it was going to heal them of the different illnesses they had. So before penicillin and things came out, it was something you could do. It was very, it was really the happen in place. And so the Crazy Water Hotel actually has a well in the basement. So there's water, one of these mineral wells down there.
And that's where they say, a lot of spirit for some reason like water. They hang out around water. What's your take on that? Like you've been all over the world on a lot of different travels. Have you found that?
Well, I sure think something must be the case there. Like, because in the Crazy Water Hotel, I mean, when I visit, it's all fixed up and nice, and I would love to go back there now. But at the time I visited it, it was condemned.
Oh,
We bribed the caretaker with a bottle of booze to let us in.
oh, there you go. That's a way to get in.
It worked, yeah. And while I was waiting, I was with my friend Greg Stevens. You've had him on before, haven't you? Greg and his son.
Yeah, from RIP.
Yeah,
Research and investigation of the paranormal. Yes.
Definitely one of my favorite paranormal.
And Brandon Lee. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they really have all the equipment, and it takes them an hour or more to set up. So I was just trying to stay out of their way. So I was just walking around in this, derelict hotel. Teal was there too. She was there, and I wandered off. She was sitting and talking to my husband at that point. I wandered off, and with my bare eyes, I saw a glowing ball of light just kind of going along. It was about the size of an orange.
Okay.
I've never seen a white, I don't know if it was ball lightning. I mean, I just honestly, I think my jaw dropped. You hear about your jaw dropping. I think that was one time in my life, because I thought, oh crud, it was done. And I thought, why wasn't I taking photos? It was like maybe a 2-second or less.
Don't you love it though? Like when all the good evidence comes around, you're like, darn, you don't have your equipment out. You're not recording, right? And it seems like that's when the best evidence happens, when you least expect it, right?
Yeah. Other thing I noticed too, a lot of times when we're setting up, that's when stuff happens.
Yes.
So now I've learned to just walk around and really pay attention, because that's happened to me a few places.
It just kind of sneaks up on you.
Oh, it does. It does.
Like the quintessential boo, right?
Oh, I know. They did. Greg did get shortly after that, though. After he shouted out to me, and he's like, "Tui, are you seeing anything?" I'm like, "What?" They got a little video of me of this little, maybe it's smaller than the light I saw, maybe the size of an egg.
Okay.
Light going around my head.
Huh.
Now, I was looking the other way. They got it on film, and I was looking up a different way, because we started hearing like if you took a nickel or a penny and you just tapped it against a window, it'd make a distinct like.
Yes. Yeah.
Something was doing that. There was where we were waiting while they set up were some skylights, and we could hear this like tink 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 tink, and it sounded too rhythmic. It was like something trying to get our attention. So I was kind of walking over in the video. You see me kind of walking. Unbeknownst to me, there's like this egg-shaped white light going around my head. It was so weird.
So you could sense something for sure. You knew something was going on there.
Yeah, I did. We did know something was happening. We just didn't know. None of us saw that light.
So is there anything special about your research with Paranormal Texas with that book?
Well, I do a lot of research in general. All too often people will just get on and Google something and call it research, but I actually like to do, real historic research, talk to historians if I can, visit the place, look for old people in the town and see.
That makes it all that more real, doesn't it?
It does. And that's how I do like even my travel guides. So I would go around and I like to like go, if there's a little town, I like to pop into the hardware store and see if there's an old guy just hanging out. Sometimes old guys will just hang out at the hardware store, and I'm like, and you just strike up a conversation, and these guys could be talkers, or at the local diner. But I like to ask them, my questions, and then ask them, what don't people know about your town, and get that information. So that's a fun way. So that's my traditional, what I do. Of course, then I do book research and newspaper research and all of that, archives and anything. But for Paranormal Texas, I also had to, do some paranormal research. So that was really fun. That was a different dimension. I had never done that.
I know with your research, with getting started, I think you had some kind of a funny story you said about how you got started.
I did. It's kind of like a cautionary tale. So my friend and I signed up, we paid, I forget how much it was to spend the night in this haunted hotel. I'm not haunted house, sorry.
Okay.
And I had not thought in advance that anyone can call themselves a paranormal researcher. Anyone can say, I've got a paranormal team. I just naively went, oh, these people have a Facebook page. I guess they're legit. Little did I think about the fact that, I have since met people like Greg from, Texas, Rip,
Rip.
and other people, Teal, of course, who are really legitimate researchers and but, it's not like even if you want to sell real estate, you have to have some sort of paperwork. There's no test you have to take to become a paranormal researcher, is what I'm getting across here.
Right.
And
Right.
I learned this the hard way because my friend and I went, and this house we were at wasn't in the best part of town. And the other people who came along were just there, not so much to do research, but to party. They were like smoking wacky tobacco and drinking a lot of booze and kicking each other and trying to scare each other, doing jump scares all over the place. So they were making so much racket. We were trying to find a quiet place. Then one of them got scared and started crying and said he got scratched, this big guy. And he goes running out. And then one by one, they just all fled, which to us was a relief. But then
So the ghost kicked them out because they were too loud?
Maybe so. But then the people who were the paranormal team, they ditched us too. So it ended up just being me and my friend alone in this house, which, by that point, we're like, great, now we can actually get something done. And I did get a couple EVPs and we were sitting down. It was kind of neat. But then we hear, a thump on the door. And then we're like, oh, maybe one of them came back. I go to the front door and there's one guy standing there who just reeks of booze, who I'd never seen before. And then behind him, kind of down the steps a little, there's another guy who was like, and he had a hatchet in his hand, from what I could see.
What?
I know. And he goes, hey, do you girls want a party?
What?
I'm like, no, I don't think our husband.
Yeah, no thanks. Slam the door in his face or something.
I tried. I think I said Rocky. I tried to come up with like a manly name. I said, my husband, Rocky, is upstairs. Hey, Rocky.
Rocky is upstairs. Okay, yeah.
Think of like a burly name just off the top of my head. And then we shut the door. But then she and I were trying to concentrate, and we kept hearing them shuffling around outside. We going around and around the house. And so we finally, there was only one functional door in this place, which
one functional door.
Yeah, we couldn't eat. So I forget. Yeah, we made some noise to make them think we'd gone the other way. And then we fled out that one functional door and into her car so fast and just peeled out of there. And we're like, holy moly, that was scarier than any ghost.
Oh my.
Yeah. So that was my long-winded way of saying, like, if you're gonna go on a ghost hunt with someone that you see their page on Facebook, do a little more research.
Do a bit more research.
I do research all the time, and I stupidly didn't think to vet the paranormal groups. Duh. So from now on, yes, do that.
Now, this brings us into your research. So I pulled up, this is on your Patreon, and we're in here before and after headstone preservation. Now, some of the stuff that you talk about is, tell us more about the symbols and things like that you talk about with headstones.
Yeah, so if we scroll on here on this, this is.
I really like this Masonic one here that you have there.
Yeah, that's the compass and square. And so I don't do, let's get clear, I'm not the one who does headstone cleaning, but I love a good makeover. And this person, and the most I do is I carry a whisk broom with me, and I'll just whisk away bird poop or leaves, because you really need to leave headstone cleaning up to the professionals. Professional people need to know what they're doing, and it can be dangerous. Like if you scroll down there, look at that rig he has. That's heavy. The one up above, see that the wood and everything, lifting those rocks, you can really damage yourself. I mean, you got to be careful in a cemetery. So, but this person contacted me through my newsletter, and so I asked my newsletter readers, this person cleans. David Dewberry is his name, and he is in Alabama and that area, and he this is what he does. This is his profession. So I said, what should I ask him? What questions do you have? And I think 10 people responded with different questions they had, and this was the result. So there's a 2-part thing. So
this one talks about the marital handshake that's on there. You can see two hands. Mm-hmm. One is feminine and one is male. That means it's a marital handshake. And with this one, the broken rose is a symbol fully bloomed roses mean adult woman, and the broken stalk express that her life was cut short. I didn't know this about the
Oh
symbolism.
yeah, especially with the plants. So if the fully blossomed roses are usually associated with women. I mean, not always, but usually. And
Right.
but if you see a little rose bud and it's broken, it's probably the grave of a child. And sometimes it'll even say, um, let's see, um, like grew, bloom. No, not bloomed. No, I can't. No, I don't have it. Something about grown on earth and blossomed in heaven. I just
Aw,
butchered that, but I
okay.
just saw that epitaph yesterday.
Okay.
But
Now
yeah,
this one here is a hand reaching out of a book, and a finger pointing up lets us know that the deceased has gone to heaven. And it looks like it said in this case, it's combined with an open book to represent the Bible, remind us that the path to heaven is through the teachings of Christ in that one.
yes.
And the fraternal handshake, do you want to talk about that?
Well, it's another handshake. So when you see a handshake, you need to look at the clothing. So are they? Do they? Is it like we were saying before? You can tell it means they're married if you have um, like a masculine clothing, a cuff, and female cuff on their clothing. It's hard to describe. But this one, if they have the same kind of clothing on, it's probably God welcoming them to heaven, or maybe a family member welcoming them to heaven.
Okay. And this one here, this one talks about ancient Egypt. Now, talk about this one. What's the significance of seeing this so often in the older cemeteries?
Yeah, well, so it did. The obelisk did originate as an ancient Egyptian symbol, and in fact, I just wrote a big long article about it a couple months ago for American Cemetery and Cremation. But without getting too bogged down, our founding fathers in America looked to the past, and the ancient Greeks and Romans were using the obelisk, and
Yes.
basically, it stands for the connection between heaven and earth. So the sun rays would hit the top of the pointy part of the obelisk, and then the bottom, the base there, that represents the connection to earth. So Christians have adopted it, that symbol, and so it is really, nowadays it can be considered a Christian symbol. Sometimes people get frightened because they find out the origin of a symbol goes back to maybe ancient Egypt or something, and they think, oh no, what does that mean? I thought my grandpa was a Methodist or something like that. You're like, yeah, but we borrow symbols all the time,
Right. I
and
think
so
Christians use that one to symbolize resurrection, as well as the connection between the Heavenly Father and the earth. And then we've got another one here. This one looks like, yeah, the compass and square, the
mhm.
Masons. Do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, that one's a pretty common fraternal
Mhm.
organization you'll come across as the compass and the square. And in the middle, you will see, well, and those are both carpentry tools and they have symbolic meanings for leading a moral and just life. And then in the middle, sometimes you'll see the letter G, and that stands for the Greek word gnosis, which means knowledge. It stands for generations, and it stands for God, the grand architect, because there's a lot of architectural metaphors that the Masons use in their teachings.
Indeed, there are a lot. I'm sure you found that along your travels with the Masons. There is a lot of symbolism.
Yeah.
Now, this one is a book and cloth. I'll scroll up so you can see
Oh,
it.
okay. Yeah. A lot of times you will see draped cloth. And in this case, the book probably stands for the book of a person's life. And then the cloth coming over it stands for the veil between life and death. So that's the end of their life. That's the final page of their life. So yeah,
Okay.
it is very interesting.
Yeah, you can see it up there on the top. Interesting.
Hmm. hmm Yeah,
Yeah,
symbols
yeah.
symbols all make sense once you learn about them. At first, it seems strange, but the more you realize, oh yeah, they're just being a poetic way of looking at life. It's just a metaphor for things. It's kind of I find them really fascinating.
Now you've got a lot of other different things. I guess we can go. You were recently over in Italy, correct?
Yeah. Oh yeah, this was so fun.
Yeah. Let me go ahead and pull
I
that
was
up.
I was hired. Yeah, well, you get it up. I'll explain how I got there. Once again, it was through my newsletter, which is the best way to keep up with me. You could just go to my website or whatever, sign up. But and this woman she does art tours, and she lives in Italy. She's an artist, and she invites groups of up to 12 people. She keeps them small, 12 and under. It was the group size, and then she does these 10-day tours through Italy, and they to see different things. And she was fascinated by symbols and cemetery symbolism. So she invited me to come along and explain the symbols in architecture and things that we would be experiencing in Italy for 10 days. And I asked, could I bring my husband? And she said, sure. And so she put us up. I felt very spoiled. We had a private driver who took us around. We got to see Milan, Genoa, Florence, you know,
Nice. Now
in
this picture here, was this at the airport, this weird looking one?
No, that one is a drain spout in Milan. We went to the cathedral
Oh,
there, and in the cathedral there, we saw a crypt down below. They had an uncorrupted saint. We saw an ossuary. I think I have a picture of the ossuary. That's me on top. We went up to the elevator and went to the roof of so we could look around. It's a Gothic cathedral, so all those structures, so
nice
many.
architecture. Now
I
this is
know.
scary looking. What's this all about?
Yes, that was amazing. It was very hard to get photos because the light was so low in there, and I didn't want to use a flash. But it was an ossuary, which in Milan, where they had taken sometimes in the old days when they would run out of room in a cemetery, they would dig up the bodies and all the skeletons and then just stack them. And this guy got an idea, or some monk got an idea of making designs. So he had patterns and designs. I have other pictures of it more than this. Is a close up though, because I was just staring at the skull. And they made a little chapel that's just full of bones, and all the designs in there are bones.
Kind of spooky, right? And do you know if anybody ever like went in there and did investigations? I mean,
No,
you
we
think
weren't
about all
allowed it.
these bodies and people like on
Mm-hmm.
top of each other. You'd think you'd have an astronomical amount of activity. Did you
Yeah.
feel anything different or heavy or weird when you were
You know,
there?
I didn't feel anything heavy exactly.
No?
It was a unique feeling there, though. I would
Okay.
like to go back. It was very, very still. Felt very holy. It was in a church, and it felt
Oh,
very
okay.
yeah, it was in a
Mm,
Catholic church. It was quite interesting. Oh, there's pictures of we
okay.
stayed at Agriturismo. It was a place from the 1400s, so I'm sure it was haunted.
So you had this is an interesting statue.
Yeah, that was in Bologna, which
Bologna. Mhm.
these massive cemeteries they have with amazing sculptures. Like this is, look at the look on that guy's face. I mean,
This
there.
looks like an angry angel. Usually angels look angelic. This one
Mhm.
looks angry, like, "What have
Yeah,
you been doing, Tui?"
yeah, no, and
Right.
technically, he's called a genius. So
Oh,
the genius express. Um, they're in neoclassical tombs, and they are usually young boys, and they will have things next to them to tell you stuff about the deceased, like what his occupation was, everything. And
oh.
yeah, this one he certainly had some attitude. And Mark Twain had visited that particular cemetery, and so had Ernest Hemingway. They both loved it, but Mark Twain
Okay.
was a big fan. But as we walked around, some of the sculptures in there's one sculpture that's gotten me both times I've been there, where I thought it was a person for a second, and I actually went like, "Excuse me," and I'm like, "Oh wait, you're a sculpture." I'm like, "You got me again." It's a life size monk. He's got a beard, and I just come around. I'm kind of trotting around the corner, and every time I think it's a person. Well, they're very realistic. I mean, if you're scared of statues, yeah, I think it would really freak you out. My husband and I almost got locked in there one time because the door changed our first visit there, and I was thinking, what would have that been like to have spent the night there? Would have been kind of cool.
I'm gonna pull up your main website now,
Okay,
Tui Snider, and, so this is where you land when you go there, and then you've got your cemetery newsletter and your books. Let's, go in and look at your books because I know you've got
sure.
a lot of them, and, there's a whole bunch of them there. Scroll down for details. So let's get some pictures of your books here. If I click on them, will I be able to see?
Can't remember now when I made the page. I think I just made it
Oh, there
so.
we go.
Oh no.
There's a couple of them that we were looking at, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. And I've got like I have another book that's
6
it's
Feet Under
yeah, 6
Texas,
feet under
Graveyard
Texas. That's a lot
Journal,
of fun.
grave goods, all kinds of grave stuff. What got you fascinated with the graves, Tui?
Oh, well, I mean, I always like to say my origin story goes back to when I was 9 years old, and a man tried to kidnap my friend and I, and we escaped by running through the graveyard. And the only reason we played in the graveyard so much when I was a kid, because which is not a good thing to do really, because we were running around, but we had assessed it. We knew where the dangerous bits and places were and where you might trip. So yeah, And then, as a teenager, some friends and I used to go and, have picnics or read books in the cemetery. I didn't know that was a thing, like that it just was
Well,
a private place,
a
right?
lot of people find cemeteries comforting to go and hang out at and things like that and are not scary. But for
Mm,
some reasons, when you go at night, it's just depending on what cemetery is, it's just a shift. Have you
yeah,
been in many cemeteries at night and investigating?
not too often. A couple I have. Most of the time I'm there in the day. I always abide by whatever the signage says, and I only will do an investigation at one if, like, if it says it closes at sunset. I won't do an investigation there unless I get permission from them, which it's surprising to people. Actually, quite often, if you ask nicely and they think you're mature, they will say yes. So I always tell paranormal investigators not to break the rules and sneak in. I know how to sneak into a few cemeteries.
Well, you do cemetery tours, don't you?
I do. That's what, yeah, I do. Here in Texas, I do them, which is a lot of fun. But I do them during the day because I want to show people things. I don't want them tripping and falling, and it's easy, easy enough to trip and fall during the day. I mean, I have done a couple at night, just because the event I was at didn't end until the evening. But it's hard to point things out. But I have done. I did go in Granbury once. I attended a séance that they had in this gazebo, like at a grave site, and it was pretty cool. The things that were coming through there. That was a lot of fun.
Now, I know you mentioned a little bit about urban legends. Are there any ones in Texas that you want to talk about?
Oh, there's so many urban legends. My thing is that urban legends, you have to be very careful. They can really cause problems. So there's one here in Texas about Smiley's grave over in Garland, and I've seen even some pretty big publications and well-known YouTube channels, and I was do tell, like, not the truth about it, use the urban legend. So the gist of it is there's a grave there with 5 people in it, all from the same family, and
Right.
it's Smiley. And the false rumor is that Mr. Smiley killed his entire family and then killed himself, which does happen. But the minute it was a headstone, right? So I had the date on there. I think it's like May 29th, 1927 or something like that. So the first thing I did was I plugged that into a newspaper archive, and guess what? A deadly nighttime tornado came through Garland, Texas. And before I knew it, I dug around and I found the
Oh,
list of the Smiley family, and how they were not expected to live, and how the
okay.
tornado had come through at 3:30 in the morning, which I find so terrifying. I have nighttime tornadoes are just wrong.
They're
I
the worst. I know,
They should
right?
not
Especially
happen.
when you hear that warning, you're like, oh God, what am I supposed to do? I can't see it
And
coming.
I'm so glad that I have an app on my phone that lets me know. And even better, I have my
Yep.
cat who, if the weather
Yes.
says it's gonna be thunder and lightning and she's fine, then I know it's not gonna. If she walks into the room, she does this little thing where she belly crawls and she starts going meow meow, and I'm like, oh, we're gonna have thunder. My husband's like, no, it's not supposed to happen.
Well,
I'm like,
ever
well, look
since
at our cat. So,
it's been storming down, like I said, at the ocean there, and the
mm,
cat's been under the blanket for the past like
oh,
2 weeks. It's a sin. But
poor
now
thing.
let's talk a little bit about your doppelganger and your mimic that
Oh,
you encountered. What happened with that?
yeah, that was down at the Ballinger Hotel, and I was with Becky Vickers. I don't know if you've had her on your show. She and her team,
Oh
and
yeah, no, Becky.
also, yeah,
Okay.
Becky Vickers. Yeah, you should have her on. Becky Vickers of Beck's Ghost Hunters and TX Rip. So I mean, it was nice. Two great teams at once. And we were there, and they were setting up again, and so I was staying out of everybody's way. And so I went up to this hallway where the owner had taken us around, Dan LaFave, and he had said, this hallway, you can really get a lot of EVPs. I'll just give you an example. So he just whips out a tape recorder. I mean, we're all standing there. This has not been no prep. He just whips out a tape recorder and he goes, hey, if there's anybody here, I hope you will make yourselves known. These people drove a long way to be here, blah, 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 blah. And then when he played it back, when he says that, hey, I hope you'll make yourselves known and let them know you're here, you hear a man's voice go, I'm right here. And we were like, what?
Okay.
So I thought, okay, so I'm going up there. So I go up there and I start doing what he had done. Meanwhile, everybody's downstairs. I'm staying out of their way, so they can get all, if they need my help, fine. But if they don't, I'm just staying not underfoot. So I just say on my tape recorder, And I did a YouTube video about this if anyone wants to hear it. I do have the video on there. I mean, it's the audio. So on my tape recorder, I say, hey, I traveled a long way to be here. If anybody's up here, I wonder if there's any company up here, something like that, just let me know. And then I count to 10. And then I was about to say something else. And then my friend Greg goes, hey, Tui, are you singing? And I go, no, I have kind of a sing-song voice, but no, didn't think anything of it. Flash forward later that night, like Greg kept seeing me. But it wouldn't be me. I'd be somewhere else. Like I'm sitting in the same room and he goes, Tui, where you at? I'm going, I'm over here. He's like, that's weird. I just saw you walk by.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
like, whatever. I didn't even think about it. I was kind of, I just didn't, there was other stuff happening. It's a very active place. Like things were happening while we were setting up, of course. But
what's the name of the place again?
It's called the Old Park Hotel.
Old Park Hotel.
In Ballinger. So then, get this. All right. I didn't realize that while I was upstairs doing my recording, Becky Vickers had already placed one of her tape recorders on the table next to me. So all of a sudden, I get a frantic Facebook message from her. She's like, Tui, oh my God, listen to this video, to this audio. I'm sending it to you now. I was just, we had a long drive home from this. So she goes, I just was listening back over all the recordings of the night, and I heard the one where Greg thought you were singing, and girl, I hear you singing.
No way.
I'm like, what? And so I hastily, I'm getting my micro cassette recorder out. I'm going back to the beginning. Her audio comes through, and you hear me go, I just wondered if I had any company up here. And then it sounds like me, and it goes like doot 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 doot. And even to me, it sounds like me. But the weird thing is, it's only on Becky's tape recorder. It's not on mine. On my tape recorder, you just hear, I just wondered if anybody was up here with me. Silence. And then you hear me go, and then you hear Greg going, Tui, are you singing? And then which I think is kind of cool, because if it were me and I were faking everybody out, you would hear it on both of them, right? But no.
And both recorders were in the same room?
Yes, mine was in my hand. Becky's was on the table next to me, and I didn't even know it was there because I was just trying to stay out of their way. I thought, So that was one of the weirder things I'd had happen. It was kind of fun.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I love it when stuff like that happens unexpectedly.
I know, I just felt like
play back your recorder and you get a really good EVP. Or even, do you find that a lot of your EVPs are on like unexpected devices like trail cams and stuff like that?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't done one on a trail cam, but yeah, I mean, they can just appear, things just happen when you don't expect them to.
Right, the least time that you expected, like when you're setting up, like you said, or breaking down and stuff like that. And you get all these weird Class A's. I'm like, what? Where did that come from?
Oh, right? I wish we had one going downstairs when they were setting up, because they were like, we heard someone walk in, slam the door, which locks from the outside, because we all locked ourselves out, right? So anyway, we were like being very careful. So yeah, someone walks in and we hear him going, Alan, like calling out pretty loudly, like, Tui, can you go see who that is? I go trotting downstairs, I go running into the room, and I quickly realize nobody's here. So I stick my head out and I look up and down the street, but nobody's there either. We heard them walking inside the house anyway. So yeah, we realized, wow, this thing it started already.
Now, I know you mentioned mineral wells and Granbury. What about Miss Molly's? Did we already talk about Miss Molly's?
No, Miss Molly's is a good one too. Oh yeah. Miss Molly's is an old hotel down in Fort Worth in the Stockyards area, which is the area, they used to call it Hell's Half Acre. And it was the area where pretty much anybody you've heard of from the Wild West went through there. Long-haired Jim, Courtwright, Luke Short, Wild Bill, like Butch Cassidy, Sundance Kid. They have Sundance Square in Fort Worth. I mean, so it's really all those Wild West figures. And this hotel is just so haunted. I've been there several times. Actually, when I was on Coast to Coast AM the first time, I called in from there, which was a lot of fun. And
shout out to George, right? And all of his team.
And he knew Miss Molly's right off the bat. I told him I was calling, and he was all excited about it. Yeah. So, and the funny thing was, after I hung up talking to him, I had some phantom like cigar smoke in this one area. But the
Mm.
weirdest thing I've had happen there was I was on a ghost hunt again with Greg Stevens, of course, and Becky, and it was that time of night where we put all the equipment away. A lot of people have gone to bed. It's just the last of us like eating cookies and just we're tired, but we're wired. So I couldn't quite go to bed. Everyone else was all
That's what it usually is after an investigation, right?
I was just so tired. Of course, we'd had a tornado warning.
Oh
We were just
no.
all, I know it was crazy. We were just like, but we were all, oh my gosh, so too tired to get up and go to sleep, basically. And
Right.
all of a sudden, we look over and one of the doors, so it's a hotel. So when you go and shut your door, it locks. And so the door was locked, and this woman's teenage daughter had gone to bed. And all of a sudden, we all just glance over there, and the door starts jiggling, jiggling. And she goes, "Oh, maybe she's getting up." The door opens, completely opens about 4 inches, and then just kind of shuts, but not all the way. There's no way it could have unlocked. So she goes, "Oh, I'll just go check on her." Her mom does. Walks down there, pokes her head in, comes back out, and goes, "She is sound asleep." She did
Yeah.
not do that. So that was just a really of course, none of us caught that on video or anything because we were done. So it's another time when things
Right,
happen.
yeah, like when you're all done and packing up, stuff happens, right?
Oh, that is so frustrating.
So yeah, I guess the ghost was either leaving the room or checking in on the kiddo and seeing,
Mhm.
what's going on in there. So what about understanding cemetery symbols or symbols? Is there
Oh yeah.
anything any tips or things that you want
There
to
you
give
go.
people?
Sure. That is my most popular book of all, actually. I sold more copies of that than any of the other ones, who knew? Um, and yeah, I would say, when people sign up to my newsletter, I give them access to a little booklet that explains the different meaning of hands, because that could be a good place to start. Because
Right.
even plants sometimes can be a little hard to identify, and they can look different depending on who, the artistic license. But a hand, I mean, it's pretty basic. We all know what a hand looks like. Even if you're a really crappy artist, you can still draw a hand or chisel a hand, and think that's a hand. So it's a good place to start. And so the hands mean different things, like pointing up means gone to heaven. So then people get nervous. Well, what does pointing down mean? It often means in a sudden death, because it refers to like being touched by the finger of God, which gets back to a Alfred Lloyd Tennyson poem. But
Right. If the hand is pointed down, then you're touched by something else.
yeah. And then
Okay.
like the different handshakes, we talked about those a little. Like a hand up here by the neck stands for
Mm.
martyrdom, but a hand a little farther down here by the chest stands for charity. So there's different things that hands are it's kind of how I got my husband into the cemetery symbols. It's a good place to start when you're learning, and then you can decide if it's for you. What I've found is the more you learn about it, the more you see the next time. Sometimes I go to a cemetery that years ago I used to think was a little bit dull and didn't have very many symbols, and now I see different things that just went right by me. So it is kind of fun.
Now that you think about it, there's a lot of different headstones, that we have a lot of really older graves and things like that here.
I bet you
So
do.
now, yeah, when next time I go, I think I am going to look a little bit closer and
Mhm.
look for those different kind of symbols. And I really appreciate you pointing that out to us, because I know a lot of different paranormal investigators probably had no idea what the different symbols and things like that even mean.
It can really enhance your experience about what that person was all about. It can give you interesting
Yeah,
clues about them
yeah.
if you learn a little bit. And yeah, I think it's what was I going to say? I had a certain thought you were saying there. You're talking about well, it'll come back to me. But yeah,
Well,
it's a
you've
good place to
got a
start.
lot of books, though. You've got another one, 6 Feet Under Texas.
Mhm. That's a travel guide to unique cemeteries, and like you can make good. I put that out during COVID because I thought visiting cemeteries was a great way to get out of the house and be socially distant.
During COVID. Oh my.
Uh-huh. But I put in really quirky things, like there's a guy who he had a phone line installed to his mausoleum for 3 days after he died, and he would joke, because I want to be able to call you all from hell. But he and
Well, a lot of people didn't the people used to put, like, bells and stuff stuff in their grave because they were afraid, they would bury you alive, and then they wanted to be able to ring the bell if they were down
Well,
there.
yeah, I've seen patents for different kinds of coffins like that. I've seen
Right.
patents for exploding ones too, because they were afraid that someone was going to dig them up and use their body. And people used to really,
Exploding ones.
yes,
Booby trapped. Oh my
I wondered
gosh.
how many. I know. I wonder
Okay.
how many times they went off by mistake, or how many of those who ever. I haven't heard too much about that, though. You think we would have heard if that were the case? But can you imagine? Sometimes people in the day, if I have stories of people who would have a leg amputated or an arm amputated, and they would bury that separate with its own little headstone, because
Really?
because they thought that when Judgment Day came, they thought they really needed all their parts, and so it was very different.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, being that I worked in the operation room, I've done
Oh,
lots of amputations and stuff, and,
well, and now
you bring it off to the lab or whatever, not thinking about, "Oh, I wonder, do they want this to, bury it somewhere?" But I've never had a patient ask that before.
I I'm so glad to ask you that. I've been wanting to ask a health professional that, because I was thinking, you know what? Nowadays, I mean, my dad had to have his leg amputated, and he wasn't. I was thinking, because I read about so many of these people having their legs amputated, and then in the old days, and then paying to have a nice headstone for it and a burial. It's like, does anyone do that anymore? No. I mean, we
I've
think of it
never
as
had
medical,
anybody
but
ask for that before,
I,
but
it's
I think, yeah, you got another book, American Cemetery and Cremation.
Oh, that's the magazine I write for every month. I write a article about the meaning of cemetery symbols, different ones. So,
Yeah. So
like, I'm
you got
working on one for Valentine's Day right now because it's a couple months out, and I got one for Christmas coming out. That's pretty fun.
Now, didn't the place you were at in Italy, they recently hired you for cemetery symbolism guide?
Yes, so they hired me to be their symbolism guide in September, and it went so well that they want me back for next year. And we're actually going to start the tour on Halloween in Rome. So we'll be there for All Saints Day and All Souls Day too, in the
Oh, wow.
cemeteries there. So we'll see. They do big celebrations, very different. I mean, here in
Yes.
Texas, we do all sorts of things like Dia de los Muertos that we just
Yes.
went to, which
Mm,
was really great. There were some really wonderful events, like in Oakland Cemetery in Dallas.
yeah.
But next year I'll be with the Italians, doing it Italian style.
So, folks, we're watching right now on pre-recorded. We're on UPRN, and we're on 97.7 FM, and we're also on paranormal.nl.podcast@gmail.com. You can follow Tui Snider at tuisnider.com, and don't forget to follow again UPRN, and I'm going to give another station ID out because I think I screwed up that one earlier. I think I would have it all memorized by now, right, Tui?
That's a lot.
Oh boy. United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM, New Orleans, USA, and 105.3 FM, Gulf Coast, USA. And listen to UPRN and follow Tui. Tui, give a shout out to all your fans and where they can follow you. You've got about a minute left there.
Hey, everybody, thanks. If you want to follow me, just go to my website, Tui Snider, Tuisnider is my name's tuisnider.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you see a weird cemetery symbol, this is what I was going to say earlier. You can always email me a picture of it. I love interacting with people. And if I can't figure out what it means, me and my newsletter readers will work on it and let you know. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Yes. Yeah, she's got a newsletter, and she's also got the tuisnider.com. Now, I'll also put up the patreon.com for you also. And yeah, definitely follow Tui Snider. And thank you so much for being on. We really appreciate having you on. And we've got still about a minute left. Do you want to give a shout out for some of your favorite locations? I know you mentioned Mineral Wells already. For tourism in Texas, where else do you recommend? If I'm coming to Texas, where should I go? You got about a minute to shout out.
Well, I'd say, first of all, you need to get my books, Unexpected Texas and Paranormal Texas. That'll give you a good overview. But another one of my favorite towns in Texas is Jefferson, Texas. That's East Texas. It's marvelous. I think there is a lot of haunted history there, and a lot of just a beautiful, gorgeous cemetery. They have a strong connection to New Orleans, so you really got to see their cemetery. I think I would highly recommend that. In fact, I would love to live in Jefferson. It's one of those towns I just think is really magical. got to check it out.
A lot of people talk about Jefferson. It must be something about the hauntings over there. Thank you so much again for being on tonight, Paranormal NL podcast, sponsored by the Bog team. And we're going to end out this episode here with a little bit of a Bog team metal.